Okay, we might kick everything off. So thanks everybody for attending today. It's really good for us just to try and keep everybody up to date what's happening and where we're at with our iTWO Safe launch and release. So we've done a few presentations and webinars and quite a bit of media as well around it. So today I'm just going to do a little bit of a status update with where everything's at in terms of all of the hardware and infrastructure, and just go back into the app, show people again just what the interface is like, how we're going to be reporting a couple of additional changes that we've made within the interface, remind everybody of what the bands look like, and I'll go into a little bit around the bands as well. And then just really break into a little bit of a Q&A time in case people have some specific questions around the application, the architecture, the infrastructure, what and how we're recording information. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and there we are. And I'm just going to firstly just bring up our bands. So for people that haven't seen the presentation before, these are the bands that we have selected in terms of iTWO Safe. These were chosen for a particular reason, which is one, they have a very flexible firmware that sits in the band. So it allows us to do a lot of easy updating and pushing of additional information as we want it to come in. It gives us a lot more flexibility. So they do run off of our mobile application and linking to that. But we also have the option of linking it through BLE gateways as well, which is another option that we're looking at, so that there isn't a reliance on a mobile phone. We also chose these because they are very construction sturdy. We looked at a few other ones where the bands look quite weak, look like they would pull off, look like there may be some issues that occur with them. So we decided to go for something that was a much higher quality, very good quality band, very good quality screen. The vibration warnings were very clear and crisp, and the visual warnings were very clear on the LED front screen as well. So these bands are already dispatched from the distributor and on their way to Australia. So they were supposed to have arrived last week. There was a hold up, just as everything is with limited flights, and where everything has to go through customs is getting far greater scrutiny and security checking at the moment. So we have been advised that they are in Australia. They're just waiting to clear, and then they will be available. That will be our first batch that we will have available to go to market. So we already have some pre-commitment around those, but we've tried to make sure that we've ordered enough that we have supply as more people want to come on board. So, but the bands themselves have been very stable in all testing, which is good. So we've been getting accuracy levels in the vicinity of 0.25 of a meter in terms of straight BLE accuracy. So sounds like a little bit, but we're also then doing, because we're using an AI back end, we are doing some configuration in the back end of that, which ensures that that quarter of a meter is coming down to around about 10 centimeters. So with the straight firmware, they're around quarter of a meter. We're actually running an algorithm on the back end of that, and it's taking it down to around about 10 centimeters accuracy that we're getting. So it is just really ensuring that we're not getting any false positives and we're not getting any issues as we're coming through in terms of breaches and warnings, that we're trying to be as accurate as we can when it comes through. Just one more reminder for people that haven't seen this before, but you know, we are going to be running an app off of the mobile phone that links to the bands in the first instance, as I said, and then we're looking at other technologies and ways that we can be accessing information directly from the bands as well. the iTWO Safe is almost like a dual authentication. So you log into the app, you link the app to your company and in ID that you've been given, which is how you basically get that access, and then you link the device to it. Now, as soon as you deregister the device or as soon as you disable the application, you are no longer being tracked in any capacity. So, it's important for people to ensure that when they do go to site with the app version, that as you get to site, you go through and do add your device so that once you go onto site, you are being tracked and monitored. Two of the other things that I have discussed before, and I'll go and show this as we go back into the interface again, which is we do have the distancing guidelines and safety tips available directly from the mobile application. This is just so that if there is any specific requirements around a customer that we're dealing with, it gives us the opportunity to ensure that we are capturing those. So if we set things where a safe working distance is 1.5 meters, we can actually put a note in the distancing guidelines that safe working distance is 1.5. If we're doing things around staggered stop times, staggered lunch times to ensure that we are maintaining social distance requirements, we can also put that in there as well. And that can also include any additional distancing guidelines, whether that's working in confined space, working at heights, or anything that we're dealing with where we know that there's challenges, that we can have those actually reporting. The other aspect, as I've previously discussed, is around the safety tips. I said, and safety tips should be treated as any of those site reminders that we want people to always be aware of, but also if there's any daily reminders or activities that are pertinent or important for that day. Because we're syncing the safety tips directly back into the application, it does make them available. So at any time that if there's a weather condition, if there's going to be a large piece of equipment or a large crane movement that may be impacting some areas where people can't access, that can always go in as a safety tip, and then people don't have to have caught that in the morning stand-up. They will be able to get that information directly from their application as well, and ensure that they're staying up to date with any of the safety requirements that are occurring. So I think, it's really important for us that we had a good quality band and good functionality in the application to ensure that everything was set up and running the way that it should. And that's just enabled us to go beyond just having an application that is only monitoring and standardizing on distancing requirements or looking at breaches, because the whole purpose and experience that we're after is to create a predictive or a preventative environment for users, so that the first thing they will do is get a warning that they're within a breach zone of somebody. That should give them the opportunity to then stop, look around, see if anybody or where somebody is nearby to them, and then look at how they can maintain or secure a safe distance as part of that. Now, we understand on site that there will be instances or times that people will have to breach. So if they're working together or if they're actually installing equipment where they need to be within those breach zones, they're still going to show up as a breach. Excuse me. It won't be continually beeping and it won't be continually vibrating on your wrist, but it will capture that breach has occurred and won't allocate that breach until you move away and back together again. So, but what we have the ability to do through reporting is actually start filtering out those breaches that we know are because people are working together, or because there's a rationale or a reason that people will be breaching those safe distance requirements as we go through. But we still want to be able to make sure that we're maintaining, tracking and monitoring, because if there is any illness, infection or reason that we need to be able to put people in contact with each other, then we want to ensure that that is permissible and possible through the use of the application. So that's just sort of a little bit around the back end of where the app is. Now we'll jump into the screen again. So there's a couple of main components that we're dealing with, which is number one, we have a super administration role. So this is so that we can have multiple companies that are set up underneath the super admin environment. So if you're a company and you're going to have 10 subcontractors that are working underneath you, we can actually set up and configure an environment that allow you to come in and maintain and manage subcontractor companies that are working for you, and ensure that the right people or the right person then it has the ability to set up and structure those subcontracting companies underneath them. Or you may want to actually control all administration, in which case you would just have yourself as the super admin, and then managing all other users and companies that sit underneath you. But it is a way that if we are dealing with multiple companies on a work site, we can actually go through and start working with them. We also have the function that if you have a large list of contractors or companies that you're dealing with, we can go through and start doing a search through a filtered search. So if I wanted to actually come in here and search for RIB, because RIB is a company that I'm dealing with, sorry, case sensitive, then I can actually come in and see anything that's associated with RIB. So it starts giving us that ability that if we have a large number of companies that we're dealing with, we can always come in and start sort of filtering and using those key searches that we're going through. It also gives us then the ability to go in and add those new clients. When we go in and add the clients, there's a couple of key details, and I have spoken about these before. You'll put in a company name, you'll put in a contact name. That contact name will be the person that gets to be administer the user site or the access for the users under that distinct group. You will have to then have their email address, which will give them a joint or a dual authentication that they'll have to go and verify that their email address is correct and that they are indeed the true contact that's dealing there. The next two fields are ones that are very, very important. So the API URL is really looking at where that information is going to be stored and tracked. So we have this set up so that it can be hosted in the Azure cloud, and we can do all the monitoring and reporting directly from a container sitting on Azure cloud. That allows you to have no infrastructure. You just really get the bands, you get the mobile application, and you're ready and up and running, and we set all that back-end infrastructure up for you. If there are instances where you want to host this on your own internal sites though, we do have the ability to actually take your own URL and start applying that so that the data is then getting stored on your own internal infrastructure. The other thing that we have here, which is the company UUID, is dealing with the bands. Because we may have different companies that are working for different contractors, we want to ensure that there is some separation and that, you know, one person doesn't go and have a company funding a band for them and then they go and work on 10 different work sites. So we're actually setting it up so each company can have a unique UUID or a user identification for their company within the band itself. It's just a configuration that we go through to ensure that we are actually managing, controlling these bands for sites. And that way, if I said there is a subcontractor that would be going and working for 3 or 4 different developers that are all using iTWO Safe, they don't automatically take that infrastructure with them in terms of the bands, because those bands are going to be fit for purpose for the company that has actually procured them based on that UUID that we're dealing with. And the other thing as the super users that you'll go through and do is you'll set up the number of users that you're allowing the company to have on site. That will ensure that they are not exceeding the number of staff that you allow them to have on your work site. It will also be a way of tracking and ensuring that they do have the correct people on site as they're going through. And once you've done that, you can actually just go and submit that. It sends off the validation email and starts dealing with setting up the other end of the infrastructure. The other thing from a super admin point is we are dealing with mobile applications as well. Sometimes we will be doing updates and changes to those applications where you as an organization can ensure that there's a force update. So if we do a force update, what it does is it will then send a notification to everybody that's got that installed on their mobile phone. And they will need to update the application before they can log in again. So it's not that it's going to go through and automatically do the update for them. It's just going to notify them that there's a new version of the application and they actually have to go and update that application to be able to utilize it again. So as we go and add additional functionality and features, it gives us the ability to ensure that everybody is up to date and using the latest information and is really aligned with the version controls and functionality that we have built into the application. So it is really important for us to ensure that we are controlling and managing those updates as part of it. So that gives us all of the functionality that resides within the super user application. And then that takes us into our dashboard and user configuration as well. So our dashboard and user configuration is really our control screen where we can start to get information around the users, around different configurations and around different reports. So when you log in, you're automatically going to see this dashboard, and I'll come back to that because first of all, I just want to go through a couple of the other things. So number one, we have our user management. So where we actually have a list of all of the users that we're dealing with. We also then have this user login status. So we can actually see from this list any users that are currently logged into the system. So you can see at present, there's 3 people that are logged in to the system, which means that they're active users. So we can actually start looking at and controlling if they're on site or not. That's not the only thing that we can do though, because in this instance, I've got one person that's doing some testing of the data. He's not an active user. So as much as he's logged in, he's not an active user, so he's not being registered. So if you have people that have been removed from site, they're no longer working for an organization, we can activate and deactivate them directly from within this interface. It does also give us the option of going in and editing any of these users as well. So I can actually just click on the edit button. It's going to take me back into that user. It will tell me the user's name. It will tell me their employee number. It will tell me whichever device or operating system they're working on. And if they've registered a beacon, it's going to tell me their beacon ID. So if there's anything that I need to go in and change, so whether that's an employee ID, if it's a beacon ID, if they've lost something or they forgot to deregister or there's an issue, or if I just need to find out which operating system or device information they're working on, I can actually go in and have a look at that and I can update any of that information as I need to. Sorry, I've just been logged out of my system. I'll just quickly jump back into that. All right. So as everything else inside the interface, we also have our search functionality. So if I actually want to go through and have a look for an individual user, see what their status is, see if they're online, see what they may be doing, I can come in here, I can search the name again. So in this case, I'm just going to search for Romit. Sorry. 1, 2. Oh, sorry guys. A little bit of a hiccup there. My search field isn't actually going through properly at this stage. Must have been from my login functionality. I'll see if it's working on here. 206. Yeah. So I'm having a little bit of an issue with my filtering on my users at the moment. So sorry about that. But normally what we can do is we can just go and type in a name, it will then start filtering on names. It will filter on beacon IDs so that we can start controlling that as well. We can also control which of these is going to be our searchable option or our filter options. So I can filter on employee ID, I can filter on name alphabetical, I can filter on beacon ID, right? So we can start to go through and look at all of the different filtering options that we're dealing with as part of that. If I wanted to go and add a user, it's exactly the same field that you get as when you get the edit button. So I go to add a user. It's going to ask me for their user details, their employer ID and their beacon ID. The other thing that we have though is because some organizations may have 500, 1,000, 2,000 people on site, they can all be controlled inside a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet, and we can do an automatic upload. So we have the ability of actually going and searching, grabbing a CSV file, applying that, and then it will go through and update the entire list of users for you. And that's just a way that we can then go through and just ensure that we don't have to manually go in and add all of those people, because we've got a site list that's already been managed and controlled, and we just start applying that information so that it's brought up to date for us at any point in time. In terms of the configuration settings, this is where we can actually come in and set things around different zoning requirements, our distancing guidelines, our safety tips, and also dealing with any of our company UUIDs that we're dealing with. So as I said, that company UUID has been set up here for one company, unique number to them, so that all of the bands are basically tied to that company, right? If you want to enable user location or disable user location, this is where the checkbox is for us to be able to do that. So we can actually come in and actually go through and configure that and either turn user location on or off. Same with our zone requirements. So we can actually start coming in and looking at, well, what is a breach and what is a warning? So red being a breach, yellow being a warning. We can come through and start configuring these. So I can actually come in here and say, well, I'm actually allowing up to 1.5 meters in terms of a breach. So I can start, go through, change it to 1.5, hit submit. It's going to update the zone details. It will also then push that out to all of the reporting requirements so that everybody is up to date. And then the same here, if I wanted to change that from 1.5 to 2.5, and that's just going to be 1.5 out to 2.5 meters. Go submit. And now I've re-enabled what my zone settings look like. The distancing guidelines and safety tips that I was talking about, this is where these are configured. So all of these, I can go through and delete any of the ones that are sitting in there. I can then go through and add new ones as soon as I want to. So if I wanted to edit one, I can just come straight in and edit it. They're all fully editable from an admin. So as soon as that's meant to be 1.5 meters, I can just go in and type whatever my new message is, and it's going to do it. If I wanted to add a new one, I can then basically go through and add. I can then put in whatever that guideline says. So I could have this one, beware when working in confined spaces. Oops. And then suddenly I have a new one that's there as well, right? So it's already updated, and then that will push out to the applications. And then that's exactly the same with all of the safety tips. So anywhere that I have a safety tip for a day, or I have a safety tip that's going to be important over the life of the project, these can then all be set up and configured. And as part of what we're doing, we're going to help companies ensure that this is all configured and set up correctly as soon as we're going through the implementation process, to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of how to use all the features, how to set up the safety notes. We'll help set up all the safety tips and guidance regulations for you. And then really train you in how you can manage those for when you want to update new site messages and who has control to doing that. So it's just a really easy way for us to go in and ensure that we're getting all of that information coming through. So, you know, that configuration setting is really just the guts of what we're dealing with once we're on site. So we also have some specific reporting that we can pull out. So all of the reports, we can start setting up date fields. So I can come through and select, and I can just start clicking on when I wanted to do a date and even down to what time I wanted to go through and set that time. So I can set a starting date and a time to an end date and a time as part of that. Now the time was something that we've added in because some people were wanting to, when they had high breach times, really be able to go in and have a look at it down to the hour. So it meant that we can now even just be reporting down to an hour or down to 30 minutes. It's not tied to a day because we're setting this into the date and time configuration as part of that. But we get a few different types of things that we're dealing with in terms of the reports that we can pull out. So we have a tag ID audit log. So the tag ID audit log is really that ability where we can start looking at each of the employee IDs. And then having a look when the device was registered and when the device was deregistered, or registered and deregistered throughout the system. That way, if we want to track and see if people have been using the band through the day, it gives us the ability to do that. This is not around a timekeeping or checking people on site. This is really just down to ensuring that when people are on site, or when we know that people have been on site, that they are registering and deregistering those bands properly. So it just gives us a good way that we can just sort of go through and check this. And the same thing that we can start then searching on a registered date and time. So we can actually come through and have a look at a date when people have registered. And then we can actually start tracking that for how many people were registered on a particular day. So we can make sure that we're not exceeding the safe number of people on a site at any point in time, because we may be managing and controlling, you know, a large number of subcontractors as well. So we actually want to ensure that we're doing it. Also, all of these reports, we have the ability to download. So they'll just be downloaded into a CSV file. So any of these, I can go and click on the download button. It's just going to bring up my save as dialog box. And I can then go and save those as an Excel workbook, and it will actually just ensure that I'm then have an editable history of that, and something that I can push into any other systems that I want to be able to go through and do that reporting from as well. As well as doing the tag ID, we can look at a warning breach count per user. So this will actually take any tag ID that is on site and tell us how many breaches and how many warnings that they've had. And again, that can all be configured down to a date and time. So, you know, if we wanted to check on those heavy sort of breach periods, we can go through and say at 12 o'clock on the 9th to 1 o'clock on the 9th, how many breaches has this person had and how many warnings has that person had? Just as a way that we can go through and really start managing, controlling, working with our sites and ensuring that we're looking for resolutions to problematic times or problematic areas. Or if there's one individual that has a continual high count, we can actually go and address that and say, is it because of the type of work they're doing, or is it just because they may need some additional training around safe distancing practices? We then also just have the standard breach report. So this is actually just looking at any breach or warning that we have coming through. So we can actually look at this and say, you know, is it a breach? Is it a warning? Which tag ID, to tag ID, and what time did that occur, right? So starts to really give us this information that we're dealing with. Again, if I only want to search for warnings, I can come in here and just search for warnings. And it's just going to give me, sorry, capital again. And it's just going to give me my warnings that I'm dealing with. So I can, yeah, Sorry about that. Just got an error come up as I did that because I'd misspelled it. But it allows us just to really go through and start getting that key information, make it filterable. If there's a particular tag ID I want to search against, I can go through and search against a particular tag number. Or if there's a particular tag too, I can go through and search against that as well. So it just really makes it easy for us as we're going through and filtering. And then again, I can just go through and outload that and put it into a report output as I'm dealing with it. In terms of the dashboarding, dashboarding is fairly similar to what we had set up previously, with a couple of minor changes that we're going through. We still get our total user interface here. So it's looking at our number of users, looking at our total devices, logged in users, last alert, total number of warnings that we've had and total number of breaches that we've had for the project, and the today's breaches and today's warnings. Still get my configuration box here. One key thing now is this can be daily, it can be monthly or weekly, or it can be monthly. So I can actually go through and configure this box so that I'm getting it over predetermined times. And I also can go through and select this on a date range as well. So I could actually come through and say, well, I actually want to check last week and have a look at the figures from last week. So we've tried to make it so that it's not just a static report that we're getting, but we have the functionality that we can start going in and looking at this on a week-by-week basis. So as we've gone through and run our reports, if we decide that we have to go and do a little bit more investigation into a particular period of time, that we can still go through and have a look and be able to ascertain how many breaches and warnings we've been had through that period of time. Now that's exactly the same now with our daily. As I said, we have an individual daily report. The report's on the hour. Zoom in and out. So just with your scroll wheel, it's easy for us to actually start zooming in and out on this so that we can start cutting down on those particular times. Or actually bring it back in until we're getting, and the same as I've been able to do previously in searching on a day, I can also then go and search on yesterday or the day before, and I can start then really just filtering down to individual hours on individual days with what I'm looking at in terms of my breaches and warnings. Because this is just on a sort of an hourly, daily basis, then it still enables us to just go through and do that. And the same changes have been made to our thermal mapping. So where we have our thermal map here, and we can sort of go in and have a look at where our hot zones are. Gives us that ability. Remember, I've had people that have just been working in very different offices or walking around. So our hot zones and breaches are a little bit disparate as we go through here. But it enables us to actually go through and do that. If we want to go through and look at different things, we can change the opacity of those so we can make it lighter so that we can see underneath. We can change what the gradient is, and we can change the radiuses that we're dealing with. But I can also go through and say, give me that report for an entire month, and it will go through and start updating this and then compiling that data in a new map, which looks at my overall monthly figures in terms of the density of where those are happening. Or I can just go back to a particular week, or I can go to day. And if I go back to my week or my month, remembering that I do have the ability to then go through and start selecting which week is it that I want to view. And just sort of starting to really utilize that information to ensure that I'm scrolling it around properly and getting up-to-date information. Same thing as I've said with other reports, it just enables us that functionality that we can then go through and ensure that we are really capturing and tapping into using this information in a proactive sense, so that as we get thermal hotspots, we know that that means there's a large number of breaches and warnings that are occurring at that place, and we can have a look and say, is there a bottleneck? Is there something happening? Or what are the major issues with it? One of the other things that we're looking at, as well as Google Maps, we're trying to look at supporting GeoTIFF, so that if people want to actually take a plan, convert it to a GeoTIFF and have that GeoTIFF laid into this particular map location, that will be actually able to track it against a site plan as well. We're still working on that, and we've had some positive testing coming out from it, but it is something that will be in probably the next release when it comes out. So at the moment, we're just still supporting the Google Maps interface, but we are looking at doing a map overlay or a plan overlay so that people can actually have it against their physical site plan, and start to look at managing those sort of proactive measures to increase the social distancing and awareness around a site to ensure that we are being safer as we scroll and pan through it. So that's really a high-level overview of some of the new features that were brought in, on where we're at. For people that haven't seen it, what it actually looks like. You know, as I said, the bans are definitely on their way here, just waiting to clear customs. And, you know, as I said, we've already got some orders that will be kicking off with the bans, but we've tried to have enough so that we've got the first batch, there's enough for others, and future batches are already being secured as part of that. So I will stop sharing my screen now until there's any other questions, so that we can go back to here, a little bit easier to manage. And we'll start to open up for any questions that people may have around the application. So is that something where we can unmute people, Billy?
I think what we'll do, Andrew, is if we ask people, because it's a webinar rather than a meeting, we can unmute all, but we'll just ask if anybody does have a question, if they just type it in the chat window, just to type in the chat window or type in the Q&A. But if you'd like to ask a question verbally, you can type in the chat window that you'd like to ask a question verbally, and then we can unmute you. Otherwise, if you do have a written question, please feel free to enter it in the Q&A.
So as I said, you know, it is an exciting time for us as an organisation to be able to take this to the market. We are not looking at this as a short-term solution. And I get a lot of questions as we're talking to people around, well, what are you going to do when there is no pandemic anymore, or when we don't have to do it? So I always answer two ways, which is, number one, I think regardless of the status of a pandemic or where we are, good hygiene and good social distancing is something that's going to help us in the long run anyway. The other thing is that we're looking at this in more than just the social distancing app. We're looking at how this can be tied to equipment, how we can then be monitoring and ensuring safety zones between people and, like, trucks, forklifts, machinery that they can't be near, and actually just monitoring total site safety in terms of observing distances to particular items, requirements, zones, as we go through. So it is really important for us to ensure that people understand that this is not just dealing with you know, a particular safety requirement or a pandemic. This is about changing the way we deal with construction and making construction safer for the future. Now, Billy, I can't see any questions as yet, mate. Have you seen any come up?
No, I don't think we have any questions come through. It's a very comprehensive presentation, I think, Andrew.
That's fine. Well, look, if that's the case, I'd like to thank everybody for their time. Do appreciate your attendance, and you know, hopefully this was informative enough to give you an update with where we're at. You know, we're going to continually be running a few webinars and sessions, and as we get new information, it will be shared. Some of them will just be an update or a refresh on what we've already presented. We'll try and keep people really up to date with this, as we do think that it's important for the industry, and we just want to ensure that there's enough information around what we're doing as a business to continue with our development and growth within this application. So thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to continually working with some of our existing customers and, you know, bringing on some new customers who feel that this is a worthwhile solution to their businesses. So thanks, Billy. I think we can wrap it up then, mate, if there's no other questions. And
yep, no problem.
Stay tuned for the next session.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Billy.